So this is the cordless double bevel compound sliding mitre saw from HiKOKI, and as you might have noticed, there is no cable. It is a cordless machine. So there's a lot of benefits to cordless. I don't need to spell them out, but for me, not having to bring a 110 transformer, not having to bring loads of leads and the liability associated with that, I can set up at the back of the van right down the drive, do a few cuts, and away I go. So with a saw like this, it's a perfect companion to a carpenter. It's a great first fixer, it's a great second fixer. It's going to do all your skirting boards, it's going to do your wide skirting boards if you just look at the depth of cut that that's going to give you. But what I'm going to start with is just imagine this is straight out of the box. You've got it out of the box. Don't always assume that it's going to be 100% accurate. It's well worth spending a couple of minutes just testing the fine tuning of this saw. Now it's really simple. There's not a lot of components. It's got a beautiful cast base. It's rotating around that from a solid pivot in the middle. No problem there. It's nice and solid. So where can the discrepancies be? Obviously, if I just raise it up, the fence to the blade is the first thing we check. That's the very first thing we check, okay? We're going to assume that all these factory settings, the 0, 22.5, all the notched off ones, 45 degrees are a given. So simply, the first thing I'll do is I'll take a long straight edge. In this case, it could be any spirit level, providing it's not bent, of course. And I'm going to set it against here and just make a quick visual. Perfect, it's nice and true. Now the reason I'm doing that is because this section here is cast in one piece. It's secured at both ends, so if it was out of parallel, that's where you'd make your adjustment once you'd established that it's out of square. If you put your level on there and it's not straight, there's probably a fault with that. It's probably bent because it's one solid piece, and I wouldn't imagine you could bend that, okay? So I like to use a speed square for the simple reason being it's perfectly square. These things are very accurate. You can pop it against the fence. I've got no battery in, I'm not going to cut my hands. I'm going to bring this down, and the speed square, because it's got a double shoulder on it, it holds the blade away from the sort of base. Keep it nice and parallel, avoid the teeth, and that is absolutely crisp there. But let me just tell you one thing about any cordless or any mitre saw. There's a lot of moving components and they're going to wear, and to save on wear, what you've got to remember is let the saw do the work and pull it nice and true. Don't sort of stand to one side and pull it out of there, because you will wear it out eventually, and then you'll start getting a bit of tolerance and your cuts will go out. And what that manifests itself in is obviously an out of square cut, but you get a bit of vibration as well and you get a little bit of chipping. Let's check a couple of the other functions as well. Let's just make sure that the radial arm slides nice and freely. There's no problem there, because this runs on 2 parallel arms. And again, you know, there's some adjustment here, so you could fine tune that if you thought, I don't really like that. So while we're doing that, I'll take my roofing square and I'll just check it to see how good it is at this point for square as well. I'll lay the roofing square on there, but on this occasion, I'm going to run it so I hit both sides of the fence, so either side of the blade. Straight away with the saw, you can also look down and check that all the plastic parts, these are the bits that sort of stop the fluff going in. And again, I'm going to just simply run that over to the side of the blade and just gently go back, and that's nice and true. So I'm happy that everything's at 90 degrees in this direction. We'll now check it for plumb or square to the bed, which is exactly the same principle. Again, this is why speed square is quite nice, because it's quite short. So it's a simple matter of sliding everything up and checking it. And that's pretty good, but equally at the same time, just make sure that on the back, on the sliding bevel, it's actually on 0, because you can adjust. There's a small clear sort of guide there with the actual red line on, which is what you line up with everything. You can adjust that. Now let me talk about the double bevel. So basically this is really handy. You haven't got to reach around the back anywhere to find the tilt, which is quite nice. It's all at the front, so you can pull that up and you can set it down and take it to the bevel that you want. So in this case, in fact, let me go back up to the top. I'll do it this way so you can see it a bit better. It falls to 45, which is what you'd expect, straight round for a mitre. And on this particular saw, you can use a lock button, which will always take you back to 0. If you've got the lock button out, it's going to spin past 0 and you're going to have to every time look. So that lock button is really handy to make sure that you stay on 0. So again, double bevel, goes this way and it goes right round to this way. And while we're talking about that, you can see that the fences have got slidable extenders on them, and that's simply because as you come around to 45, this is all going to catch that. So you've got to be mindful of that. If you get it out of the box and you don't see that on the back, you turn it around, you go, oh, I can't get it to 45. That's the reason. You need to make sure these are clear and out of the way. And you notice there is a little bit of play in these, so don't be pushing these backwards and forwards. Treat them with a bit of respect, a bit of care. And as a guide, if you line that up with the angle that's set on the rear of the guard, that's out of the way for this as well. The same on the other side as well, that slides backwards and forwards. The very fact that we've checked it for square this way and this way means that when you come around to 45, it should be 45 degrees, okay? So that's a mitre. But the other way of checking this, we can do it with a section of wood as well, and we'll do that. We'll just cut a little tiny picture frame, we'll try it all together, we'll make sure we get a perfect square out of that. The other way for checking it for square as well is simply by, I'll take a bit of material, I'll put a cut through it, and I'll reverse it and I'll slide it up, and I'll just make sure it's nice and true as well. The double bevel here, it will overcut in both directions. It'll take you around to about 48 degrees, but there is a method of making it do that. So unlock it, bring it around. In fact, again, I'll show you on your side, Dylan. Bring it around and you'll see here that there's a small black device. You simply take that out of the way. So in this position, it's at 45 degrees, and you'll also see there's a couple of lock nuts there as well, and they will also give you that fine adjustment. Now, after lots of use of any power tool, any nuts and bolts should be periodically checked for tightness as well, because they do tend to work themselves loose, get a bit of vibration. If the blade gets a bit dull and you're making it work a bit harder, all of these tools are prone to just start loosening things off. So it's well worth going for a little bit of a routine and checking them for straight and true. So that device there is two, one on either side, which allows you to do that. And that enables me to get me right round to 48 degrees. And to do a compound bevel, of course, you bring the table round this way. So let's say you want to do something way over its norm. So on this particular machine, you can take it round this side to, in fact, you can almost get to 60 degrees round this side. So here's 45, that's a double bevel. And on the other side, you can get around to 55 degrees as well, which is pretty useful. But here's an indication of where you might struggle. We need to get this right out of the way. You can see there's not a lot of fence left there, but it will come round. In fact, we'll probably have to get that off and then come right round. There you go, look at that. That's quite something, that's quite a cut. Let's run it up. The battery clicks in the back out of the way. Other functions, notable functions are, it has a light, which is controlled from the handle, which is pretty useful here. It also has a laser. The laser is adjusted, fine-tuned by these two devices here. It's a bit bright out here to see that, but it's ideal if you're working indoors, obviously. Always good to put an extractor on these things. But we're outside, and I've got a machine made from the factory. This is from the joinery, it's a piece we're not using, but this is dimensionally perfect. It comes off a CNC machine, so it's another good way of checking everything out. So I'm going to cut through this piece of board here. Now let's just talk about cutting with any chop saw or mitre saw. Run the saw up, don't try and force the thing through the work, and what I like to do is push it back through. I don't want to pull it across, it will run towards me. And also you can see where you've got the extent of it, you can see where you're cutting into it nice and neatly. So let's run that up. So the work is placed tight against the fence. So let's take this off cut, we're going to spin it around and we're going to try that in here. A pretty good cut there. I mean, that's perfect. So I've checked it for square. I've also checked it with the board method. I'm going to put a mitre on this board now. I'm going to flip the off cut and set it into my roofing square and just see how nice and true that is as well. And we'll do like a mimic of a mitre of a skirting, and we'll try that one as well. So the first one we'll do is we'll bring it around to 45. It locks in. We'll lock it off there anyway. We're going to run a mitre on there. slot the square in behind it. So it's true. So I'm going to do a skirting mitre through this 25mm oak face MDF, and what I'm going to do, I'm cut it through and I'm going to reverse the cuts round, so check the quality of the cut, so I've got a good side and a bad side, and we'll see how true that is as well. So that's simply taking it round to 45. So even cut through the back. So the veneer is very thin, so if you work with veneers, you'll know yourself you're going to get a good cut obviously on the face. But it's not a bad effort, but it's a brand new blade to be fair. And we'll just check how that appears. A couple more notable features of this particular saw is the table. This is quite useful. You can extend the arms. And it's important for if you've got long material or roof rafters or something like that you're going to cut. And again, with a level, you can set it all up. So we'll set it up first. If you've got a series of studs to cut a certain length, and you can get the length on here, you can actually put a stop on as well. These are just literally going to support the whip in the wood. They're not going to take a load of weight. I mean, I wouldn't rely on them too much. Don't stack loads of timber on one end to keep pulling them to one side. Just practice a bit of safety with them. But they're really useful to just give you that support. If you're cutting a lot of MDF for skirting, for example, you know you've got to push it down really hard because it's as floppy as hell and it would hang right down to the floor. So that really helps that. That eliminates the need for that as well. It's proper sturdy, and you can set it at 2 heights as well, which is quite nice for someone who's so height challenged like me. So regular viewers of Skill Builder may have seen Roger helping me build a roof, and he was indeed using this saw to use for cutting noggins and various bits and pieces, so make sure you have a little look at that one as well. To be frank and honest with you, it's pretty much done everything I've thrown at it. I don't mind changing the batteries over, recharge them, that's no big deal. In fact, the benefits far outweigh the fact that it's not corded for me. Couple of things, I wouldn't go putting massive timbers in here, massive wet 9x3s or anything like that. Any mitre saw is going to struggle with that, even a corded one. But let's hear what you think about it. Vote now in our poll, corded or cordless. And unlike the referendum, we will respect the vote.